I'm sure that you all know the joke about the two lights across the ocean in the fog. And one of them sends out a semaphore message saying, "We are approaching each other. Would you please move to starboard?" And the other light flashes back and says, "No, you move to starboard." They get closer, and the first light sends a message saying, "We're a more important ship than you are. You move to starboard." And the message comes back, "No, you move to starboard." They got closer and closer, and then the message came, "We are a very important destroyer. You should move." To which the message came back, "We're a lighthouse. Do whatever you want." In the translation that I read earlier, I like that it says, "You are a lighthouse." Just that image. You're a lighthouse there to give guidance. It also reminds me that while we often use light imagery, and it's great imagery, there are lots of other images that do the same kind of thing. I remember being so struck by a story in the newspaper in Hawaii many years ago about someone who had been lost in his boat at night, had gotten away from the land, or at sea rather, gotten lost and away from the land, couldn't see land anywhere. And he did finally make it back, and they said, "How did you make it?" And he said, "Well, it was really quite easy. I know that you can see further in the dark than you can in the daylight." I don't know if you knew that, by the way. But especially if you're near the ocean, you can see much further in the dark, which seems, perhaps counterintuitive. But when there's daylight, there's an awful lot of haze that blocks the view. And the haze doesn't block your view at night. He said, "So I looked very hard all around the horizon, and I noticed stars in the sky everywhere, and then I saw a part that was completely dark. And I knew that was land. And so I followed the darkness, and I made it home." I love that image. I love that sense that sometimes we need light to follow to find our way, and sometimes we need dark to find our way. All sorts of different ways to find our way, to help others find their way. I was talking to my mother on the phone this week. Sometimes my mother is a great philosopher. She'd kill me if she heard me say that, but she's very philosophical and just offers little tidbits of things. And I said to her, "I'm going to light 6 candles at church on Sunday to remember the 6 men who were shot in Quebec." And she said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll probably do that at our church too." And then she said, "Don't you get tired of lighting candles after a while?" And I thought, she's right, There is a part of me that wants to get tired, that thinks, "Oh my gosh, not again. Not another shooting. Not another whatever that makes me feel like, well, if nothing else, let's light a few candles." And yet it feels like the right thing to do. Because sometimes there isn't a whole lot else that you can do. And yet as we light them, as I look at them, because they're out of the ordinary, because we usually don't have them up here, it's a brief moment for me to look and go, there's something different. Oh yeah, there's something else to think about. Jesus said we're like salt. Salt for the earth. Now, I have high blood pressure. It's one of the joys that comes with slowly approaching middle age. Work with me. I know how bad salt is for me, and if I don't know it, the doctor never ceases to take any opportunity he gets to remind me. And I'm really proud that I don't use a lot of salt. In fact, I bought a salt shaker. It's about this tall. It was full of salt, that you grind, those sea salt ones from Costco. I bought it in 2008. It still has this much salt in it. And that's all the salt I've used in going on 9 years. But nobody's told my blood pressure. It's still way up there. It reminds me that it doesn't take that much salt to be too much, as many of us know. And yet at the very same time, we need salt. If we had no salt in our system, we would drop dead. So somewhere in there is the balance. Somewhere between too much and not enough is the balance that we have to find. Oh yeah, life's like that in so many ways, isn't it? Somewhere in my daily living, I have to find that balance between too much and not enough. Not enough is thinking, I'm really tired of all these things happening. And sure, there's explosions of violence in our world, and there's all sorts of people doing stupid, idiotic, crazy things. And I just can't respond to all of them, so to heck with it, I'm just going to focus back on me. That's not enough. And somewhere on the other end of the spectrum, I suppose I could just keep lighting candles and lighting candles and lighting candles and doing nothing else. And somehow, in a weird way, that's too much and not enough again. Somewhere in there is a middle. It was really neat to go on Wednesday night to the Islamic Center in Rutland. And as an aside, it was really neat to see so many people that I recognized. I'm still new enough to town that the only people I recognize are church people, either from our church or maybe from the Winfield Church. So it was really neat to see so many people with very short notice and very little publicity, but many people had found out and spread the word, and to see a lot of folks from our church and to be a part of this gathering. And it was very cold. Wednesday was one of the colder nights that we've had for a while, and so many of us were huddled inside. It was not a big space. It was quite crowded. We're noticing that it's full, and there are people in the overflow room, and we knew there were some outside. It was really neat to read that there were about 300 people there, they estimate, between 200 and 300. And that the folks putting it on at the Islamic Center thought that if they were lucky, they would get 24. And how wonderful it was to have a few hundred people there for no reason other than just to be there. We chatted about things and we visited with each other before the program started. And the program was simply a number of speakers sharing thoughts and feelings. And then after about, 40 minutes or so, we went home. Some stayed and had a cup of coffee. Some mingled and visited with others. Some lit more candles and plunked them in the snow outside. It wasn't a huge thing, is what I guess I'm trying to get at. I didn't do much. I just took a little bit of time out of my evening and I went and stood somewhere. But in that act of doing something that simple, I was able to say in however quiet a voice it was, I care about you. You matter, and by extension, people like you matter. And I'm here because I don't ever want to think about someone coming into our church right now with a gun and shooting some of us. That's a horrific thought. And yet it happened in a mosque in Quebec. And so I needed to go as someone who is obviously a white male and part very much of the dominant society within our society, to go and say to those who are too often treated like nobodies, I care about you. And I care about the fact that you have just as much right to worship and pray as anyone else. And that's an important right. That's a vital right. And I want you to know that I'll stand with you and I'll tell others that you have that right. Jesus said when salt loses its flavor, it gets thrown out. Jesus undoubtedly knew a fair bit about salt. See, we don't ever have to worry about salt in our culture because, trust me, you can get enough salt by eating virtually anything. If you eat, any packaged anything, if you go out and eat anything, anywhere, they figure on average once a week, you will consume enough salt. So we don't have to worry about it. It's not a big thing for us. We also, and you'll believe me today, we don't live in the hottest climate on the planet. At least not year-round. But in hotter, drier climates, salt is so very vital, and people know it. And they know that if they don't get enough, they can dehydrate and they can die. People certainly would have known that in Jesus' time. They might not have understood all of the wheres and the whys and the wherefores about it, but they knew that they needed to consume salt. And they undoubtedly knew that salt can never lose its flavor. You can freeze it, you can keep it for 1,000 years. Salt will either have its salty flavor or it won't exist. It doesn't ever lose its flavor. So why on earth would Jesus say something dumb like that unless it's not so dumb? If salt loses its flavor, gets thrown out, it's kind of a way of saying salt won't lose its flavor unless it stops being what it is supposed to be. We're followers of Jesus Christ. We're called to be compassionate people. And if we ever lose our compassion, we cease to be who we are. You can't be a Christian and not care about other people. It doesn't work. If you do it, you stop being what you inherently are. It's a challenge that Jesus gives to us. It's a reminder that if at any point we get to that stage of being tired, and I understand it, believe me, in this world, I understand when any of us get to the point of thinking, I am just tired of caring about other people. Except that's never an option for us. It's just never, ever an option. It's one of the reasons why we come together. It's one of the reasons why we do this silly thing on Sunday mornings when, there are a lot of ski hills out there that are looking pretty good today. But we come here because we know that when we gather with other Christians, we can support each other and we can share with each other. And if someone's going, I'm really tired of the way the world is, we can connect with them and go, yeah, I'm with you there. Or I'm really bothered by this situation or that situation or this or whatever. And we can support one another and go, yeah, I hear you. I know what that's like. And I know that we're still called to be there. We're still called to care. We're still called to be compassionate. We're still called to be that dark land that draws us home, to be that lighthouse that shines, to be that microscopic little bit of salt that changes everything. I'm tired of lighting candles, but I'll keep lighting them. And I'll try very hard to keep doing the things that I feel called to do, and I will trust that others will support me in that as I try and support others. And that together we really do change the flavor of our world. Thanks be to God.